All right, so I just wanted to thank everybody for making it out to the seating training here. My name is Brad Zerr. I'm from Ogallala. A little bit about, does any of you know what the product specialists really do? It's a brand new position that they just started last year. Gina was the first one that got hired on last year, and then it was me. We started both at the same time. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of read you my job summary. Is that we are here to build relationships between locations and end users and the company. We provide support, training, and guidance to both the employees and customers for our particular product that we're assigned to. So we have a whole list of the objectives and details, but I just picked 5 of them here. Developing industry-leading knowledge and expertise on the assigned product, setting up and conducting training and demonstrations like we're here today with both the employees and customers, so little clinics and things like that. Provide support for all departments, not just sales, but also service and parts and AMS, a little bit of administrative as well. We're supposed to be acting as the point person for questions regarding our particular product. So, and also to provide John Deere factory groups with information pertaining to new products, new improvements, enhancements, and future enhancements. And this is kind of where you guys come in, because you guys work with this stuff every day. So if there's anything that's like, yeah, I wish it was like this, or the customer wishes it was like this and I agree, or something like that, or this needs to be changed. I'm sure there's a lot of that, right? When you're working on stuff. A lot of things that would make it a lot easier. That's where we come in to try to get in good with the factory groups, to be able to just have them on the cell phone, to just give them a call and say, hey, this is what we're having a real big problem with. And customers don't like it, technicians don't like it, parts don't like it. It's getting hard and really difficult. So we'd be able to kind of act as a bridge between the dealerships and Deere, because sometimes that can be a pretty rickety bridge once in a while, especially with new equipment coming out. So far we have myself, which is the product specialist for air seeders and planters, and then we have Regina Nargis out of Sydney, who does harvest and hay equipment. And since we were the guinea pigs and trying to figure out how this is working and being able to do these demonstrations and things like that, they're trying to bring on some more product specialists for tractors and sprayers and tillage equipment. So in the future, I think that we'll be seeing a little bit more product specialists around. And even with that, it might even be, we might have one specialist, they might even split mine up, one specialist particularly for planters and one for air seeders, or splitting Regina's up, because I know harvest and hay equipment, that all kind of ties in the same area and time, so that can get a little hectic. So I handed you guys out this course overview. It's basically, like I said before, it's just a kind of an outline of what's going to happen. The session is designed to share ideas and knowledge with everybody, including myself. So, I can't stress this enough. You guys are here to talk to each other, talk to me, so that we can all share our knowledge. Because I know some of us, it's a long ways from Gordon to Imperial, and so some practices are a little bit different between those areas. And I know, especially with working, especially in the Colorado and Kansas stores, that you see air seeders are a big thing down there, and you don't see hardly any soybeans or nothing, just because it's too dry. And then as you start to get up here, air seeders are a little less common. The planters are the biggest things up here, where people are. There's a couple air seeders out there, but not as much as what they have down there. So this is a way for us to kind of switch the knowledge around, be able to, so that if the time comes where the air seeders are starting to move up, if it gets drier, we have to switch on, the customers have to switch on their practices, then we'd be ready for it. And that goes with planners down south too. They do a little bit of planning too, but not as much as what you guys do up here. So, just going through the outline here. I have what the purpose of it is. We're here to identify, and this is for just this is for everybody's, all the training sessions, both air seeders and planners. So we're going to identify the types of air seeders and planners. That's kind of what we're doing as far as today, and in January with the planners, we're just going to focus on air seeders today and planners in January. And the reason for that is it's kind of we're going to try to identify the types. That way, when we start to get into more technical stuff, you'll be able to know the difference between an 1830 and an 1870, which most of you probably know already, but some of us new ones here are having a little hard time with getting that down. Service, inspect, and solve common issues that are going on. I had the opportunity of traveling around after most of the drilling season was done, down to southern locations as well as up here. Chit-chatted with some customers talking about what kind of issues that they're going with, most of it. Blockage monitors, a lot of it electrical, AMS stuff, very minimal mechanical issues, which is pretty good. But there's a couple out there, so we're just going to kind of tackle that, and I'll bring up kind of the common issues that from the customers that I've talked to that are having some trouble with. So, and then I know with air seeding is not much, but I know with planners there are unlimited amount of attachments, different things that go on all these. So we're just going to kind of go through the ones that are common in this area as far as the attachments go. Some of the requirements that I wanted, since this is kind of a technician-based overview, I expect the technicians to be able to be proficient in DTAC. Service advisor, know the ins and outs, submitting cases, looking up cases, doing some research on stuff like that. I'm still working on things like that. I took a DTAC class and still getting used to that. So as far as if you're a technician ways, you should already know the application components like fluid power, hydraulics, electronic components, all that stuff, horsepower, things like that, and also JDU classes. There are lots and lots of different classes you can take on JDU. Most of you already know that. The two that I picked for here were basically the one that was supposed to be due today. How many got the seeding introduction platform taking that done? Most of you. How was that? It was all right. Yeah. It's pretty long, isn't it? It goes through a lot of detail with all the stuff, and that's kind of the reason why I chose that class. Even though it is kind of based on the sales part of it, it's still good to be able to know the different stuff, because initially, how many of you had customers ask you about something when you're out there fixing their equipment? Or like say if you're fixing a 1890 and he says, well, what do you think of that 1830? Have you ever had customers ask you that? Not really? With the southern stores, they're all like, oh yeah, I get it all the time. But I think it's a good way, because if in time that a customer would be able to ask you, you'd be able to say, well, this is the reason why this is the way it works, and this is the reason why it's either common up here or not so common up here. And then you say, talk to your salesman about that. I bet is that what you do, talk to your salesman? Kind of? Or do they even ask questions? They're just ready to get going again? Okay, so going through, and correct me if I'm wrong, we can add to this list too. These are probably the most common air seeder types that we have, not just in the southern stores, but also up here. I'm kind of thinking in Nebraska, Colorado, Kansas area, the Midwest kind of area. So would you add anything to this that's as far as what's the most common in this, not necessarily particular area, but in this region? Have any of you worked with 1870s? What about a 730 level lift? You guys heard of that? Never heard of those? Okay. Well, these are mainly, like I said, the ones that are most common. They have, you don't have very many separate fertilizer placements, although I know Billy's got one, and there's Casey's got one down, a customer that's using it down in Flagler. Do you guys have any separate fertilizer placements? Imperial? Bridgeport? Not much? Yeah. 1830s are really common up down south. I know Billy's got one. Do you guys see any 1830s up here? The hoe drills? Yeah. 1990 CCS. I know Imperial's got a lot of them. Yeah, I've had to work with you guys a lot with that. I know Bridgeport's got one. That was my first call ever with Frank. With Frank. Yeah. Gordon, you guys got some up there? Yeah. They don't have down south. They don't have the 1990 CCS, which is kind of, to me, that's kind of uncommon because as much wind they get down there, you would think that they would want no-till drills down there. But surprisingly, the 1830 is the most popular down there. The 1890s, any up here? That one's kind of scattered all throughout the 1890. So we're going to go ahead and start with that. The 1890 is essentially a no-till air drill. And I'm going to ask you guys a question. What's the advantages of no-till? Is there moisture? Less compaction? Good. Less erosion? Awesome. That's pretty much all the things I had down. Less passes through the field. Economical. Residue management. Keep that residue. That ties in with the moisture. So those are kind of the biggest advantages of having no-till, because a lot of people like to be able to, especially now in this climate that we're in, is that once the ground is exposed and it doesn't have much moisture or even residue on it, if you do get a little bit of moisture, it's gone like that. All right? So a lot of people like this because not only does the residue retain that moisture, it keeps the ground cooler, and then it provides a insulation during the winter, and it also keeps that topsoil from wind erosion. Anybody heard of microorganisms? I took a class in college about, basically it was just all about soils. So they call them microbes. They're the little organisms that break down, that decompose and create basically a flourished topsoil. So that's one big thing that no-till air drill farmers like to see. Now with this particular air seeder, there are some big advantages of this one, the 1890. Is that it provides a wide range of sizes, working widths, from 30 feet to 60 feet. So with the 60 feet, you'd be able to get, I know there's one in Sydney. I kind of helped a little bit with that. You'd be able to get more work done, more acres done per day, reducing that risk for that window of opportunity that most customers want to try to stay inside with the weather and all. Another advantage of this 1890 is that it pulls an air cart. Now, most of the time, and this is another question here, box drills. Do you guys have a lot of box drills still? You see a lot of box drills still? Why is that?
Is it cheap?
They're cheap, yeah.
Easy to maintain.
They are, very easy.
Easier to move them around.
So why would someone choose an air seeder versus a box drill?
Capacity.
Capacity, yeah. Do you think the air seeder is a little more efficient? Yeah. Yeah. So that's a big advantage, especially with this air cart, is that people can carry bulk product. They range from 195 bushels to now they got this year came out was the 550. That's a lot of product. That's fertilizer or grain. So that's a big thing. It reduces that fill up time, more time in the field. But there are some disadvantages with this drill. That's a lot of hardware on the frame. I mean, each of these individual roan units have a lot of different components on it. So this is actually pretty heavy. So with it being so heavy, it might be a little bit hard on compaction. Some customers don't really want a heavy drill, like a 60-footer would be pretty heavy, versus like an 1830 that's a little bit lighter, that doesn't have as much. Also is the serviceability on these. Ike, I'm going to pick on you. On a 1990, it's pretty crowded underneath the tank, and even getting down in here to grease these Zerks on here or service any of these things. It's pretty difficult, isn't it? Yeah, each one of these row units have, and correct me if I'm wrong, 3 grease Zerks on them, which the manual calls, there's 2 of them that you only grease annually, and there's 1 that you grease every 50 hours, right? The closing wheel right here is the one you grease every 50 hours. Now here's a kind of a trick question. Is the book always right? Not necessarily, no. That was one of the biggest issues that we've had down in Leota and Cheyenne Wells, is that the customers would grease these closing wheels. What happens after greasing them and they ran them into the dirt over time? They would get dirt filled up in them. It would cake. Then their closing wheels wouldn't work. So they had open trenches right behind them. So sometimes, and Mark Booty said this when I was down there doing their customer clinic, is that he said that you just grease them annually. But if you do grease them every 50 hours, you have to keep them greasing them. You have to stay on that. You can't grease the 50 hours and then after 100 hours grease them again. You have to just keep that grease going through them. Customers don't like greasing. I know, because that was my job in high school. I somehow always got grease all over me, more in the Zerks than. So the serviceability on these are a pretty big disadvantage. But the thing is that why do customers choose this is because, like you said before, there's a lot of farmers that are switching to that no-till practice so that they can keep that topsoil there. So when they put it in there, it retains that moisture, it protects the topsoil, and we get good yields out of it. So if it does rain, that residue will be able to keep that moisture in. But, like we said before, there is a downside. Over the years of no-till farming, you have a lot of compaction through going with combines and grain carts and trucks and air seeders, sprayers. So once in a while they have to be able to break that hard pan out of there, because once that compaction pan gets on the bottom, the roots fan out instead of go down. And then that's how it competes with the rest of the crops that are in there, planted, drilled in there. They have strip tills today that some of them are specifically for no-till. I'll use my dad as an example. He's got one that's a no-till strip till. I guess that's how. I don't know what that's the right way to say for it, but the knife blade is designed to where all it does is just kind of lift it up. And he uses that to put in the soil nutrients that it needs, like anhydrous ammonia like you see, and phosphorus, fertilizer. And that's another downside of that, because if you no-till, you can't put in, you can't go in with the sweeps and then put in phosphorus, because that's tillage practice, right? You have to do some sort of tilling. So strip till is a lot of, or one trippers or whatever they call them. We call them strip tills. You guys call them one trippers. It's that it's able to get underneath, break up that hard pan, restore the nutrients in the soil, but with minimal surface disturbance. And with another disadvantage of it is that if you don't have any sweeps or tilling it up, then you have to resort to herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, spraying. And chemical can get really expensive, especially if you spray the weed and it comes back a couple weeks later, or you don't get it all. Next I'm going to talk about is the 1990 CCS. Some of you had a lot of experience with this. It's basically the same tool as the 1890. The only difference is that it has a tank on it. And that's probably why a lot of customers want that, because they don't want to pull that big, heavy air cart behind it. It only goes from 70 to 100 bushel though. It doesn't go any higher than that. So, and then another thing is that the 1990 has very small working widths. It only goes up to a 42 foot. So, some of your farmers, like I'll say Frank for example, he drilled his with barley, and that air seeder worked perfectly for that, because that was basically what he was using it for, right? The 1990 is economical. It's cheaper than getting a 1890 and an air cart that goes with it. But you have the smaller working widths. So it's great for farmers that have smaller acreage, that don't need to spend a lot on getting an air cart or whatever. That'll work great for them. Some of them would like to go to an 1890 and do. It's all about preferences with some customers. There are more spacing options with this. And you can also, when a salesman configures this or builds it from the factory, you can choose between a dual rank, which is what you see here, or a single rank. So if they're doing any type of specialty or products, or of course you don't really see very many single ranks up here. Most people have double ranks, dual ranks, right? Imperial? The seed metering on this is almost just like the 1910 commodity air cart. The only difference is that it has, instead of kind of a gravity feed, it relies on this meter to kind of push it on out. Although the weight of the product helps with that. And then you have the agitation system right here. Most of the components that are in the CCS here are the same as what's in the 1910 air cart. You got your agitation system, you have tank level sensors, you have a meter wheel roller. The same basic principle goes in here. Air is produced in the plenum, pushes it through, creates a suction, pulls the seed down. It's all kind of the same basic design. It's just kind of set a little different. And what's different is this on this CCS is that it goes into individual rows, or I want to say secondaries, but on a 1990, I'll call them primaries. Because if you have splitters, then I call the splitters secondaries. So most of the time, instead of having an 8 primary run system or a 4 or 6, where the big old tubes are underneath, it just has these smaller ones. And you can have 29 of them up there. So it drops the seed down into them, pushes them down. It's kind of the basic how it works. Most of you all know that. The meter rolls on these are a lot different, though. They use the same basic type. It's just these are all plastic, I believe, right? They're not kind of that rubber composite like an air cart would have. So you have your 3 choices, not necessarily color-coded. You got your low rate, that's good for sorghum and small seeds, grass seeds sometimes. Then you got your medium rate over here. It's good for wheat, sorghum. And then where you see most common around here is the high rate. Most people go with these white rollers, and that's good for wheat and soybeans, a little bit larger seeds. Can anybody, and Perry ought to know all this, and so does Bridgeport, but what are these? What are those for? Yeah. Yep. They're called metering gates. They rest pretty much right in here. They shut off individual rows if you want to. And also in the book it says that it's supposed to give a little bit better control over the application rate. So when it's fully open, of course we know it's all going to come through. It's not. But some people, and most customers up here, they just keep them open. I mean, is that kind of what happens? They're pretty much fully open. Or sometimes you don't even really notice them, they're there. But they're fully open, right? And the reason for that is because of some people like to drill bigger seeds like soybeans, yellow peas. They'll want to keep that fully open. Most people keep it fully open and just kind of change their transmission speed, transmission setting. But in the book, it gives a little more accurate control of the application rate. So when it's a quarter of the way open, it's good for small seeds. Halfway open, it's good for medium seeds, and fully open, it's good for large seeds. But like I said, around here, you don't see them change that. Unless they're doing some sort of calibration, then they'll close those. Because when you do a calibration, you don't close any of those. And I'm thinking of you put the bag behind the actual tube that you take out of the splitter and put the bag on the tube, right? In the tube in the bag. Well, if you didn't close the rest of them up, you're going to have that one row that you're calibrating not going to have any seed going into the row. There are one thing that both of the 1990 and the 1890 have in common are these 90 series openers. Hence the 90. 1890, 1990, it's the 90 series openers. Pretty simple, right? These 90 series openers, I'm just going to go through the basic, the components. Most of you know what they are, but I'm just going to go for new training's sake. The opening disc is at a 7-degree angle. And then you have the seed boot that sits right on the edge of it. Seed boot's designed to pretty much slow the seed down as it comes down the tube and gently puts it into the furrow. This little plastic flap, which I know you have to replace once in a while. Those wear out pretty quick. That keeps the seed from blowing out the trench, the furrow, because there's still air blowing out the bottom of that. So if we don't have that flap on there, and some people it works, some people it doesn't, especially when you got lighter seeds like wheat or barley, or the seed will just ricochet right off the bottom of that, and it's going to stay on the top. So that's where that flap is there. It's just a little plastic flap. And then behind that you have your packer wheel, your press wheel. That's designed to firm the seed in the seed furrow. And it has 3 settings on it, from 5 to 45 pounds. 25 would be kind of in the middle area. And that you can adjust. Most of you probably know this already, but right here. That's where you adjust that. And then behind that, you have your closing wheel. And the closing wheel also has 3 adjustments on it. From 26 to 43 pounds, that's behind here. It closes the furrow and kind of packs it in nice and neat. The gauge wheel, I kind of skipped. The gauge wheel here is kind of probably one of the most important components on there. Gauge wheel keeps the disc at an operating depth. The gauge wheel, and we've had some issues with this, I know, especially on no-till, with this is a no-till drill. A lot of people, the ground is so hard that even if they do put that fully down, they have tons of downforce pressure. The frame's lifting up off the ground. That gauge wheel's, when they start moving, it won't spin. That much gap between them. So sometimes that gets a little difficult. But the thing about the gauge wheel is that it needs to be firmly on the ground, but it doesn't need to be forcefully on the ground, or it can't be off. And the way that you use to get that good to go is your rock shaft, your hydraulic downforce. And when you do that, there's been times where I've seen customers that have too much downforce, and so the gauge wheel is firmly on the ground, but it's so firm that it's just pushing the dirt out in front of it. It's not rolling over it. It's just pushing. Snow plowing, I called it. So a good way to, anybody know, what's a good indication that they have good hydraulic downforce on the rock shaft area? Does anybody know how to kind of check that? The rock shaft is a square like you see it there, right? And in order to get pretty much average to good hydraulic downforce, you want that square to be level. And I know in some situations it might be a little off, but you can see it here. It looks like it doesn't have enough downforce, right? So when that rock shaft, that square, gets level, that's pretty good. And then you look at your gauge wheels from there. Make sure that they're firm. Question. Both the 1890 and 1990 have 90 series openers. True or false? True. Okay. Pretty simple. Why do customers purchase the 1990 CCS? Sorry?
The seed box is on the drill.
Seed box is on the drill. Good. They don't have to pull that air card behind it. They don't have to upgrade to a higher horsepower tractor. I've seen that. I'd like to get an 1890, but I don't want to switch to a bigger tractor. What else? Smaller, less weight, less compaction. Spacing's got a lot more options on spacing. Economical. It's cheaper.
Good salesman.
Good salesman? Yeah, maybe. All very good answers. Pretty much all the answers that I had. It means you're all listening. That's good. Okay, we're going to go ahead and just take a quick break.